We left off in Numbers chapter 14, where, if you remember, they had refused to enter Canaan. What I want to do for about 5 or 10 minutes right now is I want us to go back and look at what is this book for, how is it laid out, how is it structured, in order to kind of help you guys make sense of it. And then we're going to pick up starting again in chapter 14. If you guys have got your James E. Smith book, go ahead and open it up to, let's see. Let's just start in around page 403 is where it begins. I'm going to get you to do something for me. And right now, unfortunately, my monitor is just showing me only, so I'm going to get somebody over there to talk so it'll kick back and forth.
Hello,
or not.
Hello.
There we go. Okay, now I can see you guys. What I want you to do, this is a little exercise. I want everybody up there, in there, to count up to 5 and then back down to 1 for me, all in unison. Ready? When I say go, just count up to 5 and back to 1. Ready? Go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, now you can all tell your friends you know your numbers. You'll get that later. You liked that, didn't you, Jared? All right, let's start reading on page 404, where it says setting of numbers. Trip from Egypt to Sinai took a month and a half. During the next 10 months, the Israelites received instruction from the Lord, constructed the tabernacle. The priesthood was then consecrated to the service of God. The command to take the first census came 12 and a half months after they left Egypt, or after they had camped at Sinai for 11 months. So now it kind of gives us a little bit of a timeline as far as what events are taking place. If you look under the purpose, it says the book of Numbers can be summarized in the caption, marching and murmuring. In fact, the next page, it says the key thought of Numbers is discipline. I put over on the side the words perseverance very large, just because this particular book is all about them persevering, disciplining themselves, and God disciplining them. Let's have somebody read the next. Somebody take A, B, and C of the next section where it says structure. Following geographical indicators, the book of Numbers can be divided in 3 main divisions. The preparation for march at Sinai, the march from Sinai to the plains of Moab, and the completion of the march. Somebody go ahead and read A for me.
Preparation for march, Numbers 1 through 10, through that verse. General agreement exists among scholars that the first major division of Numbers extends from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 10, verse 10. The setting of this material is Sinai, the same venue which has been the focus from Exodus 19 through Leviticus. So closely is this unit linked to the second book of the Pentateuch that one scholar has even suggested that these chapters should be appended to Exodus. Before leaving Sinai, Israel had to make preparation for the journey. This preparation is evident in 1, the mustering of the tribes and the care of the tabernacle, chapters 1 through 4. 2, the enforced purity of the camp, chapters 5 through 6. 3, the offerings for proper worship, chapters 7 through 8. 4, the second observance of the Passover, chapter 9. And 5, the signals or service, chapter 10, verses 1 through 10.
Okay, so guys, in your Bibles or in your notes, however you're doing this, I want you to be thinking of the book of Numbers in these 3 divisions. You've got the preparation for the march itself, and then the completion of the march, or getting the final instructions, so to speak. Those are the 3 divisions that, you know, if you think in a organized fashion, when somebody says something and they start talking about the book of Numbers, in your mind, if you can think to yourself, okay, 1 through 10, that is getting ready for this march. From 10 to 22, we're then wandering around. We're in the march. And then after 22, we are zoning in on where they're going to be getting ready to cross into Jordan. It's the completion. It's the final instructions. It's a really good logical way to organize this book so that, let's say you hear a speaker talking and he said, over in Numbers chapter 18, blah, blah, blah happened. Well, your mind can immediately go to, okay, Numbers 18, that's during the march. That's when they were wandering around. You see why that makes sense and why it's a very useful tool?
Yes.
Okay, somebody read me B.
The long journey from Sinai to Moab is covered in these few chapters. Here is a record of all that is known of the 38 years of wilderness wandering. At best, it is only the record of a series of episodes. 1. The journey to the border of Canaan, 10:11 through chapter 13, included the following episodes. The burning of the camp at Tabitha, that place, and the sending of the quail, the sedition of Miriam and Aaron, and the expedition of the spies with their report. 2. The curse of wandering was pronounced because the nation lost faith in God and refused to enter Canaan. Chapters 14 through 20. The following episode are narrated: the rebellion of Korath and Dathan, Moses strikes the rock, the plague of serpents, the various special enactments. 3. The defeat of Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan, chapters 21. In Transjordan, where the first events following emergence from the wandering. The exact point of termination of the second main division of Numbers is not readily apparent. Is that part of that point?
Yeah, well, I'll pick it up. Ray said it at chapter 21, verse 9, Noth at 21, verse 13. Better suggestion is 22, verse 1, at the concluding verse of this section. The arrival on the plains of Moab, which this verse narrates, and the subsequent threats to Israel's very survival marks a clear break with the period of desert wanderings. So again, in my mind, when I'm thinking of the book of Numbers, 1 to 10, you're getting ready. You're cleaning up camp. You're learning what you need to do. You're getting organized. 10 to 22, we're marching. 22 on, we're now zoned in right around the Jordan. We're actually getting, the marching is complete, and we're getting some final instructions. Somebody go ahead and read real quick, C.
At the conclusion of the march, 5 episodes are recorded. 1, the efforts of Balaam to destroy Israel. 2, the second numbering of the people. 3, the naming of a successor for Moses. 4, the triumph over the Midianites and distribution of the Transjordan territory. And 5, the directions for settlement in Canaan.
Okay, so if I tell you guys, we're going to go back and we're going to pick up in Numbers chapter 14. What are we talking about in big picture?
March.
We're marching. We're wandering around. So see how that kind of makes sense? If you look in the next section, it talks about history of Numbers, and I'm going to have Lyle or somebody read 1 through 7 after. Let me read this thing where it talks about the main characters. Main characters of Numbers: Moses, Aaron, Miriam, Aaron's sons, Eleazar, and Phinehas figure prominently in the narratives, as do Caleb, Joshua. Numbers bridges the gap between between the giving of the law to Moses and the death of the great lawgiver. The action revolves around 7 crises. Somebody read those 7 crises.
1, a leadership crisis. Miriam and Aaron question the authority of Moses. 2, a faith crisis. At Kadesh, the people believed the reports of the 10 spies and refused to trust God for victory in Canaan. 3, a second leadership crisis. The leadership of Moses and Aaron was challenged by Dathan and Korah and their followers. 4,
Keep going.
a personal crisis. Moses arrogantly and angrily smote a rock when he was but to speak to it. The people received water from the rock, but Moses lost the opportunity to lead his people into Canaan. 5, a program crisis. When they were not permitted to pass through the land of Edom, Israel was forced to take a detour through the desert. Poisonous snakes in the region caused havoc and death. 6, a military crisis. Israelite soldiers were forced to go to war against walled cities in Transjordan for the first time. 7, a religious crisis. Balak, king of Moab, used beautiful temptresses to lure the men of Israel into Baal worship at Peor.
Okay, great. So that kind of sets the stage, the foundation of what this book is about. Gives us a good organization, a good division, and a fairly decent summary of what all we're going to be running into. We've already gotten up through the point where they've sent spies into the land. You guys remember last time what we talked about. Joshua, Caleb came back, said, hey, we can take them. But the rest of the people said, no, we're not going to do that. Ultimately, let's start picking up. Go ahead and look with me at Numbers chapter 14. I'm going to read starting in verse 28, which is basically the death sentence that Moses puts on these people. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness. All of you who were numbered according to your entire number, from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb and Joshua, you shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in. But your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised. But as for you, your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, bear the brunt of your infidelity, until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness. According to the number of days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. So, we know precisely what the sentence is. Older generation not going to make it. We know how long they're going to be there. We know why it was given that long. They were given a year for every single day that they were out spying. Now, what do you think was the temperament of the people at this point? I mean, what would you be like? Yeah.
Probably deflated at this point.
Exceptionally deflated. I mean, think about it. Here, they've been brought out of Egypt, thinking all along they're going to the promised land. And yet, lo and behold, finally, all their murmuring, they're complaining, they're griping, they're whining, it finally catches up to them. And they realize, we're not going to make it. Our kids will make it, but we're not going to make it. Now, as a father, if I'm in that situation, I'm doing one of two things. I'm either saying, you know what, it's just time to forget all this stuff. Or, number two, I'm thinking, you know what, at least I can get my kids where I hope to be. Why do you think they chose the second?
Because they love their kids?
They love their kids. And by this point, what had Moses done a great job of teaching them?
The law.
Yeah, the law, but in order to be close to God, what did you have to be?
Holy.
You got to be clean. You had to be a special people. And you guys remember we talked about the fact they didn't want to be put out of the camp. That was a disgrace. That was something that was seen as very negative. So even though the temptation may have been there to say, you know what, I'm tired of this, the desire to be close to God and to get their kids there persisted even through their deflation. What was their immediate response? Moses says, look, you could have gone up, God would have conquered all those people for you. You're foolish. So what do? What do they say?
They say, okay, we'll go back. We're ready to go now. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hey, now that you've shown me the light, I'm ready to go. And what does Moses say? That coupon you're trying to use, it's expired. So look with me at verses 39 and following. Moses told these words to all the children, and they mourned greatly. They arose early in the morning and went up to the top of the mountain, saying, here we are, and we'll go up to the place which the Lord has promised, for we have sinned. Okay, God, it's all right. Just we'll just kind of act like yesterday didn't even happen. And God says, no, I don't think so. What can we, in the year 2009, learn from that verse?
There's going to come a day when we don't get any more do-overs.
Okay? And no more mulligans. What about this? Is it safe to say that some sins have earthly consequences, some don't?
Yes.
I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Are there certain sins that have been committed that maybe only the sinner and God know about that are going to be rectified the day of judgment, but there are other sins that you're going to have to pay a price for here? And I think that's what we see going on. God's saying, you know what? Yeah, you did sin. And you know what it's going to cost you? It's going to cost you a whole bunch. There are consequences to your attitude and to what you did. Moses said, verse 41, now why do you transgress the command of the Lord? For this will not succeed. Do not go up, lest you be defeated by your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. Verse 44, but they presumed to go up to the mountaintop. Nevertheless, neither the ark of the covenant or of the Lord nor Moses departed from the camp. I think that's kind of an interesting point. They go up to fight, and yet they didn't take the ark. What does the ark represent?
Presence of God.
Presence of God. Folks, if I'm going to battle, I want the ark in the front. I want everybody. I want my enemies. I want the people fighting with me to know I got the Lord on my side. And yet Moses and the ark remained back. And they were beat before they ever took a step out of the camp. The Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in the mountain came down, attacked them, and drove them back as far as Hormah. So obviously, they learned their lesson. They got their first taste of battle, and it was a defeat. Now later on, the pendulum obviously is going to switch, and they're going to become one of the mightiest warring groups that has ever hit that region. They're basically going to go in, they're going to take over everybody. But this was a taste of defeat that I suspect God wanted them to have on their lips for many, many years as they wandered around. Chapter 15, he returns back to cleaning the people up. Laws. Laws of grain and drink. And again, I'm going to point out just, as a mention, we talked a little bit about this already. Look at verse 15 and 16. One ordinance shall be for you of the assembly and for the stranger who dwells with you. An ordinance forever throughout your generations. As you are, so shall the stranger be before the Lord. One law and one custom shall be for you and for the stranger who dwells with you. Again, the Lord. So, we talked about this type of sentiment before. What's going on right here? What was God saying to these people?
Anyone who came into their land, even if they weren't an Israelite, they would be under the law of the Israelites.
Absolutely. God doesn't have two different laws for these people, right? He has a single law, and if a stranger comes in, that stranger is also now under that law. Again, I use that, I point that out just because I think there's so many people that think, hey, well, there's scriptures in there, but if you haven't been baptized, then you're not really bound by those scriptures until after you're baptized. And folks, he didn't have an opt-out clause, a stranger clause. He basically said, look, you're all under the same thing if you're trying to get holy and clean.
What's the significance then of him saying the strangers that come in among you, opposed to the strangers that do not come in among you?
Okay? What ultimately were we trying to do to that area?
Make it holy.
Make it clean and holy. Remember, this is where the tabernacle is. And you remember we talked about those squares. We had the outer square that was the non-Israelites. They were, by definition, unclean. You then move inward and inward and inward, and every time you move in a box, you're getting more clean, more holy, until you finally get to the priests who are in that inner box that are able to actually go in to the tabernacle. So if a stranger comes into one of those inner squares, he is expected to abide by the laws of cleanliness. Look with me at verse 32. Now while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath day. And those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses, Aaron, to all the congregation. They put him under guard because it had not been explained to them what should be done to him. The Lord said to Moses, the man must surely be put to death. All of the congregations shall stone him with stones outside the camp. So as the Lord commanded Moses, and all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died. Guys, if you don't get something from this little passage, then you are either not reading the Bible or you're blind. Because all the dude was doing was picking up sticks. And yet God expected him to observe the Sabbath. In all seriousness, can't you just picture somebody saying, look, all I was doing was I was just picking up a few little sticks. And yet God says, take him out, kill him, stone him. Let me give you a similar scenario. All we were just doing was, having a piano. It's not like we were doing anything big. Or all we were doing was having worship on Saturday night because a lot of people in my younger generation, we don't like getting up early on Sunday. You see the compare and contrast? You got a guy who is doing nothing but picking up some sticks, and that cost him his life. Who are we to then go messing with worship that God has ordained? In any fashion. Much less little bitty trivial stuff. And yet how many people tweak worship and want to do things their way, and yet when, God has already basically said, here's what I expect. Questions, comments through chapter... Actually, no, let's look at one more verse in this chapter. Chapter 15, verse 39. You shall have a tassel. Now this, from verse 37 on, he is talking about specifically them weaving a blue tassel in their garments. But look at why, verse 39. You shall have the tassel that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of the Lord and do them, and that you may not follow the harlotry of which your own heart and your own eyes are inclined. To me, guys, that's strong. And the reason that is strong is, how many of you remember about 4 years ago, a lot of the teens were wearing bracelets that had the WWJD thing on them?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. In a way, this is kind of a early version of that. It's a reminder, something they would have on them physically all the time, so when they look down, it's like, oh yeah, I know who I am, I know who I belong to, and I better remember what he expects of me. Yes.
Brad, it also shows that the laws weren't subjective, but they were objective laws that they could follow.
Absolutely objective. They didn't just get to throw out their own thoughts, comments, and prerogatives. Garrett.
See this same color woven into the high priest's garments and also to the tabernacle veils. So this would have been a big theme for them. They would have been almost carrying around a little bit of like the temple with them, or when they looked at it.
Absolutely. Guys, realize colors back then meant a whole lot more than they do to us today. The blues and the purples, they were reserved for things of honor, usually for kings and for princes, because those were very expensive dyes. You didn't just go out to Target and get whatever color shirt you want. And so, like Jared said, if you see that color, not only is that thread going to remind you, it's also the color in and of itself is going to remind you. Good point. Any other comments or questions through chapter 15? Chapter 16, guys, talk about learning some stuff, or talking about God ready to just absolutely take some people down. Verse 1, now Korah, the son of Issachar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, with Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Pelet, sons of Reuben, they took men, they rose up before Moses, with some of the children of Israel, 250 leaders of the congregation, representatives of the congregation, men of renown. All right, that's only 2 verses, but there's a lot of meat we got to cover real quickly. Notice this was Reuben's. These were descendants of Reuben, 2 of them were. Why is that important? Why do you think they were willing to speak up?
Reuben's the firstborn.
Reuben's the firstborn. So you got Jacob's sons. Reuben's the firstborn. So they think they're what? Entitled to more, right? I mean, why would you give some other brother something that's more important when we're the firstborn? We should have more blessing. So you've got Reubenites and you got Korah, who is a Levite. 250 people. Now I want you to underline or circle the fact that they had actually gathered men of renown. Guys, these weren't just, people who are off the street doing nothing. They convinced some of the wise individuals in that camp to go up against Moses. Notice verse 3. They gathered together and they said, "You take too much upon yourselves." Your version may say, "You assume too much for yourselves. For all of the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord?" Somebody tell me in modern slang, what are they saying? What is...
You know great? Huh? You think you're great?
Yeah. You think you're the only one?
Am I even drinking?
I mean, think about it. Do we have any of that in the church today?
Oh, yes, we do.
How does it manifest itself?
Gossip. Backbiting. All of this stuff.
Okay?
People think the preacher or maybe even the elders may have too much power, or they're the ones that get to make the decisions, and we're godly people too. We were in the church for this length of time.
Wait. You think people would actually, go against elders?
I know they will.
Oh, yeah. Guys, it happens in far too many congregations. And You know, if you think about it for just a moment, that's a very similar analogy to what we have here. God has appointed people a certain role, and he said, look, here's your role, here's what I expect. And yet you've got people rising up out of that role saying, wait a second, I want more. Or I want to do what he's doing. Or just flat out assuming the role and doing what other people are doing. It's wrong. It was wrong back then, and it's wrong now. So when Moses heard it, he fell on his face. Obviously, he was prostrate in some kind of probably a prayer fashion. He spoke to Korah. We don't know how long, obviously, in verse 4. We don't know how long he was on his face. He rises up. He spoke to Korah, all of his company, saying, tomorrow morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will cause him to come near him. That one whom he chooses, he will cause to come near to him. Do this, he says. Take censers, Korah, and all of your company. What should have immediately been ringing in their ears when he said that? What I want y'all to do is I want you to take some censers and put fire in it. Guys, what had happened not that long ago?
Nadab and Abihu.
Yeah, look at Leviticus chapter 10, guys. He says, I want you to take censers. All of a sudden, red flags flapping up going, oh, no. We're not going to do that. We're not offering weird, strange fire. And yet Moses continues on. He says, put fire in them, put incense in them before the Lord. And it shall be that the man whom the Lord chooses is the Holy One. Notice how Moses responds back to them at the end of verse 7. You take too much upon yourselves, you sons of Levi. Where did he get that wording?
From them.
From them. They come to Moses and they say, Moses, you take too much on yourself. We need to be the ones doing this. We're all holy people. Moses comes back at them and says, no, you take too much on yourselves. He's using the same verbiage, literally kind of slapping them in the face with their own words. Moses said to Korah, hear now, you sons of Levi, is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself to do the work of the tabernacle of the Lord? Guys, Moses is saying, look, you've already been set apart, Levites. Is that not enough? And yet I want you to go on and look over at verse 13. What's their response? Look at their exact wording. Is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey? Where'd they get that phrase?
From Moses.
They got it from Moses. Guys, they are literally sparring with words here. Moses says, is it a small thing to you that God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself? And then they respond back, is it a small thing that you have brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness? I mean, it's like you can just see, mentally, you can see them digging at each other, man. They're just like, So, you think it's a small thing? Is it a small thing that you're killing us? That we don't get to do anything? That we're not in the land of milk and honey? Now look back to verse 10. It's a small thing that you do all of this. He goes on and says, and that he has brought you near to himself, you and all of your brethren, the sons of Levi, with you. And are you seeking the priesthood also? How many priests served during this period? Guys, you need to know this. This is solid information.
Just Aaron and his sons.
Okay, how many sons did Aaron have?
Now I got only 2.
4
Had 4.
minus 2.
Minus 2.
Yeah.
So, how many priests
The son.
served?
3.
3. Don't forget that, guys. So you got Aaron. He had 4 sons. 2 of them were killed. Nadab and Abihu. That leaves the other 2, Ithamar and Eliezer. So that's those 3. Who is going to be the last one that we're introduced to right as we're going into the next phase? Who carries us into the land of milk and honey, basically?
Eleazar?
Who?
Is it Eleazar?
Who's the next leader?
Oh, Joshua and Caleb.
Phinehas.
Say that again.
Phinehas.
Okay, Phineas?
Pronounced correctly.
Yes. He was described as zealous. We're going to talk a little bit about what he actually did in just a few minutes, why he was called zealous. Verse 10 of chapter 16, write, if you're one of those that writes in your Bible, write the word women beside that verse. Why would I say write the word woman or women beside that?
Which verse?
Verse 10. Why would I say, right, yeah.
I'm guessing that because they're incorporating themselves into the worship service.
Okay. Do we have women who are wanting to have more of a leadership role in the church today?
Sure.
I mean, basically, is it not true that I could go to some congregations that identify themselves as churches of Christ and literally look them in the eye as women are waiting on the Lord's table or serving as elders and simply say, are you not seeking the priesthood also? I mean, Moses is trying to get across to these people, look, you had a role. God gave you a role. What else are you wanting? Are you wanting the priesthood too? And that's what we've got going on in the church. We've got ladies who have a role. They have a very God-given role, and they can serve so beautifully in that role. Folks, let's be honest. More people have been brought to Christ, I think, through females than males. Usually it's a woman who either converts her husband or gets her children to heaven, get them to remain faithful. Women have got beautiful roles, and yet sometimes women want a more prominent role, a leadership role. Somebody had a question or comment.
Yeah, Brad, I was just thinking that this is sort of to be expected. I mean, they've had a go at trying to get into the promised land, and they're just bouncing around a little bit. And the idea of dissension coming up within the ranks, I mean, you'd look, if you were immature enough to complain against the God who was doing all that for you, you're going to be immature enough to complain against the man that he set in place. So,
right.
Especially in light of what you were saying about these guys, the Kohathites?
Yes.
Kohathites, they're having trouble with, having just very menial tasks with the tabernacle, and it would have got pretty boring. So.
Yeah. Well, and you got to realize too that things are getting disorganized by now because they've been wandering around. They've been flailing around. They went from a very organized status before the march. You guys remember we talked about breaking the book of Numbers up into 3 different groups. The first group, getting them prepared for the march, getting them organized. Well, after they start marching around and people rise up and, rebel and blah, 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 all this stuff happens, things start getting more disorganized. Tensions get high. Anger flares up. And like you say, I mean, they're sitting there thinking, hey, we didn't get into the land of milk and honey. We don't see a whole lot of progress going on here. Who are you to take it upon yourself to be the only one? Look up at verse 12. Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, but they said, "We will not come." What do you think's going on there? And first off, I guess I should ask you guys, can you picture this in your mind? Turn in the book to page 417, just so you kind of got a map of the camp in front of you, so you can kind of see what's going on. You got Moses and Aaron that have a special place on the east side of the tabernacle. Moses and Aaron go up, they call to these people, they say, "Hey, we want you to come out." Now, these are going to be Reubenites, these two men. We know that from verse 1. Eliab and On, the son of Peleth, sons of Reuben. So they go down to the south, where you see that south flag on 417. They send for them and they say, "We aren't going to come up." Why? What do you think's going on right there? What's going through their mind? You think they're fearful at all?
Yeah.
I think they're scared to death. I think they probably had a few moments to reflect, and they realized what happened to Nadab and Abihu. And all of a sudden they're thinking, it sounded really good when Korah approached us, and we had these people, and everything was going good, but you know what? We're not coming up. Furthermore, if they did come up, that would just give credence that Moses and Aaron were still the leaders, would it not? By defying them, it's kind of like spitting in their face saying, you can't tell us what to do. So you got a mixture of things going on in the politics of this particular scene right here. All right, skipping on down. Verse 18, so every man took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, stood at the door of the tabernacle in the meeting with Moses and Aaron. Korah gathered all of the congregation against them at the door. How many times have we seen that? How many times have we seen a troublemaker in the church go around spreading gossip or false testimony against another brother, stirring up the congregation against someone? And that's kind of what it's saying he's doing here. Korah gathered all the congregation against them at the door of the tabernacle of meeting. So you basically got Moses and Aaron looking out at this group of rebels. I love the way God responds. Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, "Separate yourself from among the congregation that I may consume them in a moment." Basically, if we were to translate that in the year 2009, he's saying, "Stand back, I'm fixing to light them up." And you guys know what happens. Moses tells them, the way you're going to know that God is with me is these people are going to die in such a way that nobody's going to be able to call it natural or normal. It's going to be so foreign. So we look at verse 30. If the Lord creates a new thing, the earth opens its mouth, swallows them up, with all that belongs to them, they go down alive into the pit, then you'll understand that these men have rejected the Lord. Now it came to pass when he finished speaking all of these words that the ground split apart under them, the earth opened its mouth, swallowed them up, with their households, and all of the men with Korah with all of their goods. So they and all those with them went down alive into the pit. The earth closed over them, and they perished from among the assembly. Then all of Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, "Lest the earth swallow us up also." A fire came out of the Lord, consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. Okay, now I don't know about you all personally, but if I witnessed that right there, man, I'm a faithful, God-fearing person until I die from then on. I'm like, okay, if the Lord can make the earth swallow you, and then he tops it off with a little fire on top of that, I'm good. Whatever you want, Moses, I'm good. And yet here's the funny part. almost immediately they start complaining again. If you look down starting in verse 41, they're not done. You know, it's talk about a rebellious group of people. Look, scoot back for just a minute. Let's look at verse 38. The censers of these men who sinned also against their own souls, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, because they presented them before the Lord. Therefore they are holy, and they shall be a sign to the children of Israel. So Eleazar the priest took the bronze censers which those who burned up, and they presented them, were hammered out as a covering for the altar. So from that day forward, they had what?
A reminder.
What would you call it? Say that again.
A reminder.
A reminder. Guys, you realize every time they looked up, they're seeing this new covering on the altar that was hammered out from the censers that these 250 had brought up. Talk about a serious reminder in your face all the time. Notice verse 41. The next day, all the congregation of children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You've killed the people of the Lord." These were good people. Were they really good people? No, they were rebels. Now, let me ask you this. Again, you know, I'm using this in modern day vernacular because I think that there's so many truths in what's going on here versus what we see in some church settings today. Do we ever see, let's say a Wednesday night or a Sunday night, there's a mushroom cloud at a church. Something happens. And then lo and behold, everybody goes home and phone lines are just buzzing so that by the next day, the elders start getting phone calls. Is that a real scenario?
Yes.
Absolutely. Or let me throw it to you this way. Have we ever in the church seen elders handle something, handle it scripturally? I mean, obviously they've got expediency on their side, but let's say they handle something. The people go back. They go home. They decide they don't like how it was handled. So they start calling each other, and the phones are buzzing, and they're emailing, and they're sharing their thoughts and their opinions and their emotions. And lo and behold, next day comes around, and they get on the phone, and they start a campaign, so to speak.
Yes.
And that's kind of what's going on right here. So can you see how, as you are preaching in front of a group of people, how you can pull some of the best meat from the Old Testament and drop it right at their feet and use it as modern day when you have a problem in your home congregation? If you got gossipers, man, you can't get better than this right here. To me, this is meaty stuff. So they complain against Moses and Aaron. You've killed people of the Lord. Now it happened when the congregation had gathered against Moses and Aaron that they turned toward the tabernacle of meeting, and suddenly the cloud covered it. Glory of the Lord appeared. So we know anytime that cloud is there, that there's that pillar that God is present. Moses and Aaron came before the tabernacle of meeting. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, "Get on back. I'm taking them all down again." And yet, what does Moses have to do? He wants to intercede. But who saves the day this time? Who is ultimately the man, so to speak? Aaron. Guys, by the way, if y'all haven't read this account, y'all really need to get in there and read it. This, in all seriousness, this is strong. Aaron basically does the Olympic torch running through the crowd to stop the plague. God has unleashed this thing. He's mad. Notice verse 45. Get away from among this congregation that I may consume them in a moment. They fell on their faces. Again, they're trying to intercede. When they look up, Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer, put fire on it from the altar. Put incense on it, take it quickly to the congregation. Make atonement for them, for the wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. Aaron took it as Moses commanded. He ran in the midst of the assembly. Already the plague had begun among the people. So he put the incense and made atonement for the people. He stood between the dead and the living. So it was, the plague stopped. Now those who died were 14,700. That's pretty serious, guys. That is some serious disciplining by God right there. Now you take that 14,700, you add the 250 to it that died the day before when they were offering up the censers with fire. You add Korah and all their families, and you got a pretty big number of dead people. Now, as you think about that, go ahead and flip over for just a second. That is right at the end of chapter 16. 2 chapters later, guess what God is telling them how to do? In chapter 19, he's telling them how to deal with the dead. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It had a lot of
Absolutely it does. I mean, think about it, guys. You got roughly 15,000 dead people. Suddenly the camp is no longer clean the way it was. So he basically says, all right, guys, here's what we got to do when people touch somebody that's dead. You see how a lot of this stuff makes sense? All right. Any questions, comments through chapter 16? That's a great chapter. I would suggest you know it, be very familiar with it. In fact, you might even want to be intimately familiar with it. Chapter 17. Yes, that would be a hint. Even Lyle got that one, I noticed, by the way. He kind of looked up at it. Lyle's quiet today. That's
unusual. Shooting for a 77 in here, Brad. That's it.
Hey, you know what the saying was in medical school? You know what they call somebody with a D, don't you?
I didn't go to
Doctor.
medical school.
Is that what you meant?
No. I had to have a 3.0 or else my money was taken away from me, so unfortunately I had to actually study. Chapter 17. Budding of Aaron's rod, guys. Again, this is an event that is taking place fairly quickly after all of this going on, and it is to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to remind this rebellious people who God had chosen as his special group. Now, I'm going to summarize it very quickly, but I think you all are very familiar with what's going on here. He says, go get a rod from all the 12 tribes, put their names on it. The one that we take into the tabernacle that buds, that's going to be the special group of people. They do that. They take the rods. They got the names on them. Lo and behold, Aaron's comes out. And not only is it budding, look at verse 8. Came to pass the next day, Moses went into the tabernacle of witness. Behold, the rod of Aaron, the house of Levi, had sprouted, put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. He didn't leave a whole lot to doubt, did he? Not only was this thing not just putting on a few little buds, the thing had almonds growing. So, his point is this. The sons of Levi are going to be my chosen people. Don't forget it. Now again, we got another reminder. You guys remember we have the reminder where they took the censers, they hammered them out, they put it across the altar. Now he says, take that rod that grew, that's budding. I want you to take it. Look at verse 10. The Lord said, bring Aaron's rod back before the testimony to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die. So again, God here having to remind this rebellious group of people in multiple ways, multiple fashions. So if you think about it for just a moment, what have we learned so far today in the book of Numbers? We've learned that these people, they had a special thread in the tassel of their garments to remind them to keep God's commandments. We learned that there were some rebels, so God took and he left them a reminder on the altar. We learned that he reminded them further using Aaron's rod that it was the Levites after they complained again. You know, not only was the reminder on the altar not enough, they're going to complain again to where God sends out a plague. He kills roughly 15,000 people. And he says, okay, now we're going to have one more reminder. We're going to do things my way, my people, by my instructions. Chapter 18. Any questions through chapter 17? Chapter 18 starts. And again, chapter 18 and 19, if you really think of it this way, they make sense to me. And they should make sense to you. If you had been through all of this mess, let's say that you are a offspring of Benjamin. Now, do you think any of these Israelites do you think they were living in a vacuum? Or do you think they knew everything that had been going on the last few days? They knew about Korah. They knew about the earth eating him. They knew about the plague. They knew about Aaron having to run down in the crowd to stop it. They probably heard the complaints the next day. So it's not like they were living in a vacuum. At this stage, let's just say, I got my nice little family, and maybe I haven't been participating in gossip, and maybe, I'm just kind of there, going through the motions. I don't really want to cause any trouble. What is going to be my attitude towards worship and the tabernacle at this point? I've just watched, guys, 14,700 people die in one setting. I watched 250 get crispy fried in another setting. And I watched the ground swallow some people. So what would be a natural response to that?
A bit scared, probably.
I wouldn't want to go near the place.
Worship phobia. Scared. So chapter 18 is actually trying to deal with that. He's basically saying, look, I'm going to put responsibility for the tabernacle on the priest. You guys don't have to worry about that anymore. He lays out specifically the duties of the priests and the Levites. So in a way, it's almost kind of, if you look very carefully, there's a few pages that's kind of almost like a reprieve. Look at verse 5. You shall attend to the duties of the sanctuary and the duties of the altar, that there may be no more wrath on the children of Israel. So he's trying to help deal with what James E. Smith calls worship phobia. Look with me at, starting in verse 8. Again, for those of y'all who write in your Bibles, you probably want to highlight this. Probably most of you have already got it highlighted. This is offerings for support of the priests. The Lord spoke to Aaron, here I myself have also given you charge of my heave offerings. All the holy gifts of children of Israel I have given them as a portion to you and your sons as an ordinance forever. This shall be yours of the most holy things reserved from the fire. Every offering of theirs, every grain offering, every sin offering, every trespass offering, for which they render to me, shall be most holy for you and your sons. So he's telling the priest what? He's telling them what they get. Guys, this is called preacher's salary.
Yeah, I know this one.
Should you be interested in preacher's salary?
Yes.
Let me rephrase that. Would you like to be paid eventually? What I want you to notice, and this is something a lot of people don't like to hear, but understand their priests, guys, they got the best. If you think about it for just a moment, could you give for sacrifice anything that was blemished or second rate?
No.
No. So the priests got the best of the best. And part of that was their pay. Now, that's not exactly how we pay preachers today. Well. In fact, I'll share a real quick story with you. You guys will appreciate this. And no, I'll go and say I was not in Arkansas, so Chris can get off the hook. I was doing a meeting, and I won't even tell you what state because some of you may know people there. Long story short, I was in one of the scariest hotels I've ever been at. Had it had like a truck driver's drive-through sign, I would have felt right at home. It was one of those kind of hotels where you don't want to take your clothes off. You just kind of want to lay in the bed and get up and get out as quick as you can. Next night, that Friday night, I do a Friday, Saturday, Sunday meeting. Saturday night, I'm in the foyer, and a deacon comes up to me. Now, picture this. I've got an elder here. Deacon comes walking up to me. We're talking. He says, "Hey, where are you staying?" And I told her, I said, "Well, I'm staying at the so-and-so inn." And he got this look on his face like, oh, my stars. And he turned and he looked at the elder and he said, "We put him up there?" I kid you not. He continues talking to the elder. He said, "My wife wouldn't go anywhere close to them." The elder goes, "Yeah, mine neither, but we're saving $6 a night."
Oh, that's an Arkansas a little bit.
So we got a little saying around my office that's called $6 for Jesus. We're going to say $6 for Jesus. It's real. It's sad. But get used to it, I guess, would be my one word of wisdom.
Oh, please don't tell me it was Greenbrier. I tell you, there's one elder who was
Oh, man. You guys I think y'all put me up at a Holiday Inn Express. Which that's good. That's good. Chapter 18, towards the end, basically what we're dealing with at this stage is the support for priests, the tithes for the Levites, and the support of the Levites. So again, should this matter to you? Absolutely it should. If you think about it for just a moment, there are a lot of places out there that feel like we shouldn't necessarily pay a preacher. How many of you in there know what mutual edification is? Oh, come on now. Nobody's never heard of that. A couple of you?
That's kind of like what as I understand the Latter-day Saints do. They don't necessarily have a preacher per se, but different brothers of the church may get up on that particular Sunday and give the lesson. So they don't pay a preacher.
Exactly. If you look in the Churches of Christ directory that's put out by a 21st Century Christian, there is a designation, I literally think it's ME, mutual edification. And all that means is they don't use congregational money to pay a preacher. They feel like they should use men within the congregation. Now, as crazy as it sounds, there actually is some wisdom to that, in that it forces the men in the congregation to brush up and to actually be ready to teach and preach the gospel, which we need to be doing. I'm at a congregation of 500, and guys, I was just going to tell you, there's some people in our home congregation that have the attitude of, hey, we pay a preacher, that's his job. And as such, they kind of don't take it upon themselves to do a whole lot or to get outside their little box. So in that aspect, I think it's probably a good idea. But from a scriptural perspective, I think God has always expected people to get paid an honest day's wages for an honest day's work. And we're already seeing that right here, even in this priestly nation, that the Levites were, in fact, taken care of. The priests were taken care of. Questions or comments? Should elders be paid?
Yes.
Okay. That was strong and bold. Tell me a why.
I think it's 1 Timothy 5 talks about the elders are worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in the word.
And you know that just means a double pat on the back.
Not in that text, it doesn't.
That's called a double attaboy. What about some of you other guys? What do you think?
I think
Yeah.
elders can be paid, just like preachers can be paid. Some preachers, in some instances, choose not to be paid, like Paul. He could have received a salary, but he didn't because it was beneficial for the people. I think it's definitely scriptural to pay elders. The word honor, we were just studying in our Matthew class, we're talking about honoring your father and mother and honoring widows in 1 Timothy. A lot of time honor means giving them money.
Right. Absolutely. Guys, I'll say this. I've seen all kinds of elders. Literally, all kinds of elders. And there's pluses and minuses to both of it, but I do know that congregations that have elders working in what I would call a full-time capacity, and by that I mean somebody who is able to man the phone and visit the sick, or go visit the bereaved, or go help visit some of the straying members or visitors, or help make day-to-day decisions in a building. That's a pretty serious job, and it actually a lot of times the church runs smoother rather than having three men who are all working 40, 50 hours a week at a business, and then they try to get together for a single hour every week to do the business of the church. That's not getting the job done. That's not shepherding the way shepherding ought to be. I'm sure y'all have heard me say it, and you'll hear me say it again as you guys progress through the school. Eldering should be taking place around coffee tables instead of around conference tables. And by that I mean it should be happening in homes. It should be a relationship kind of deal. And, if that means, hey, we pay some of our elders who are near retirement and we let them go ahead and retire out of secular work to be good shepherds, then I don't think, scripturally speaking, I haven't seen anything that would prevent that. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? JT, you want to add anything to that?
Well, you were asking what 1 Timothy 5:17 mean about the double honor. I think if you read verse 18, we get the meaning there. For the scripture says, "You shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing, and the laborer is worthy of his wages." Quotation,
That's right.
Both the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Exactly. Guys, if the ox is working for you, don't slap a muzzle on him. I don't know how many of you all know me and what I actually do for a living, but I am 100% fully supported by congregations and members of the church. And when I first started doing what I do, it was almost kind of it was definitely a humbling, and I approached it from not really embarrassed, but very hesitant about getting my salary. I'm not the least bit hesitant today, because I recognize what I do is worthy, and if what I'm doing is worthy, then I shouldn't hesitate in asking members of the church to support and back me. And thankfully things are going okay, and I don't have to worry about that too much. But, when you're out there, if you're doing the Lord's work, that's not to say we can't, as preachers, donate our time and donate energy for good causes or for mission work. But likewise, if you are giving of your time all the time, you should be paid for that. Let me throw this out while we're there. Many of you guys are going to be in the position in just 3 or 4 years to start planting seeds into elders' minds. Seeds about, like, for instance, when you have a speaker come for a summer series or for a gospel meeting or for whatever. Help them understand what that really encompasses for somebody doing that. How many times do you guys think I have been told by churches that they will pay for my wife to come with me? What do you think?
It's a good thing.
So how many times?
How many times? Keep in mind, I'm out speaking 40 weekends a year.
Probably 20% of the time.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Oh.
No, I doubt it.
I believe it's him.
They don't pay. They don't offer to pay for your wife to go.
They certainly don't. I can count it on one hand.
Offer, I thought he said how many times it passed.
No.
Yeah, I can count it on one hand.
Oh, I understand.
And I don't say that out of bitterness at all, because I take care of my family and my wife, and she goes with me anywhere she wants to. But the point being, I find it very ironic that we preach and teach from the pulpit that it's about family and husbands are to love their wives and yada. But when it comes down to finances, hey, it'd be a lot cheaper if that wife stayed home, And nobody's ever said that, but that's kind of the unspoken rule is, hey, we'll buy your plane ticket to come out here and preach, but another $450 for your wife, that's stretching it. Chris.
Well, and likewise, for those of us raising money to come here, I had a lot of people ask, well, is your wife going to work? And,
Yep.
And of course the school here discourages that because of the amount of time that it takes for us to do our work. Many of us, when we get home, sit down and eat, and we're back in the books until 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock or later. And so they don't understand that. But it's just, first thing was they asked, is your wife working?
I would dare any of them to ask my wife if she's working. She would take somebody out. For those of y'all who haven't met my wife, she is a full-time stay-at-home mom, and she works a lot harder than I do. If somebody, Chris, in all seriousness, when people ask you that, I hope that you will lift up your chin and say, I'm so thankful that my wife has decided to rear our children at home. We feel that's a biblical principle, and we appreciate you supporting us in that decision.
I do that.
And put it right back on their shoulders.
I do that.
Good deal. Any other questions, comments, all the way through? I'm going to point out just a couple of verses in chapter 18, just one or two to kind of help you get the gist of it, but I don't want to spend a huge amount of time here. Verse 21, behold, I have given the children of Levi all the tithes in Israel as an inheritance in return for the work which they perform, the work of the tabernacle of meeting. God's saying, look, I'm giving you this in return for the work you're doing. He then turns around in chapter 20, in verse 25, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak thus to the Levites, say to them, when you take from the children of Israel the tithes which I have given you from them as your inheritance, then you shall offer up a heave offering to the Lord, 1/10 of the tithe. And your heave offering shall be reckoned to you as though it were the grain of the threshing floor, as the fullness of the winepress. So he made sure the Levites were taken care of or supported for their work, but then what else did he expect?
They give back 10%.
Yeah. Again, guys, I don't know your personal business. I don't need to know your personal business. But I sure hope that you are giving as you have been prospered. You know, Scripture, we don't have two different Bibles. We don't have the Bible for them and the Bible for us. We got a Bible for everybody. And, you know, if the Bible says to give cheerfully, liberally, with a cheerful heart, as we have prospered, then that's what we have to do. Or actually, that's what we get to do. Any more comments, questions?
Verse 16, what was the significance of that? Redeeming the children back, buying the child back from the priest, or giving priests money for their firstborn child?
I will touch on that when we get right back.
Right.
All right.